So, big news, I'm on the move. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of The Girl Records. This is episode 1 of Girl on the Move, which is all about me, your host, Hannah Darkling, packing my bags and moving away. All of the seasons of The Girl Records is brought to you by bangers&mash.site. If you want to check out some of the content that I have previously made and may in the future make, which is still a large question mark, head over to bangers&mash.site to see what I've been doing with any free time that I get, which isn't a lot of free time, in between doing life things and also catatonic anxiety, which I think is maybe what this episode is going to be about. I was really hoping when I packed my bags and moved away that I would be able to make this season 2 Girl on the Move sort of in the moment retellings of what it is like to move interstate, what it is like to move out of your parents' home, not for the first time, but for the last time. And that didn't happen because I was going through what I think clinically is referred to as a lot, and I couldn't muster up the creative energy, the emotional energy, the resilience to talk about what I was going through at the time. So the plan now for this season, now that the retellings in the moment fell away because of mental health and grief and a lot of other things, and pandemic, let's be real, let's just use the pandemic as an excuse. We've all been doing it. It's totally fine. It's messed up our lives. This season is going to be sort of 6 months adjacent, you know? It's just a jump to the left and then a step to the right. If you do play the Hannah Darkling Makes Content on the Internet drinking game, one of the rules is drink when I sing. And I'm so sorry you will be dead by the end of this because I do a little sing-song way too often. So part of this process is me being quite open and honest about what it's like to move and the emotions I'm going through. And I think some of it is going to be what the kids would call cringy. But guess what? I'm in my 30s. Cringy is like water off a duck's back. I'm not embarrassed by liking stuff or feeling emotions or crying when I go to the post office. Those things don't embarrass me anymore. You know, stick around, check it out, see what I'm like, see. I just burped. That's what I'm like. Is I'm constantly drinking fucking soda drinks, not whiskey drinks, a soda drink, and I'm constantly hitting this plant next to me, so it's wiggling around. If you aren't aware, there is a video version of this podcast on my YouTube channel, and if you weren't aware, there is an audio version of this podcast available on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you are like, I want to be involved with this, but in a different format, don't worry. I've got you. I got you, babe. Ba-ba, ba-ba, ba-ba. This first episode is just going to be me doing sort of a retelling of the last 6 months, 7 months. Oh God, it's been 7 months since I moved. And that seems like such a long amount of time for me to have not made anything or I haven't talked about myself on the internet since then. That's a lie, everybody. I made a TikTok. If you want to see my TikToks, I will link that somewhere. But so maybe let's just stop talking about how it's going to go and just start doing it. So I moved here in November of 2020. I moved from Sydney to Melbourne. I packed the boot of my car and I moved away. Was it because I had just spent 9 months living in a house with my mother at the age of, what was I then, 31, and just not loving it because of the pandemic? Look, maybe. Was it because I always wanted to move out and it was just an opportunity? Also, maybe. So I think part of moving that we don't, well, maybe everybody does talk about it a lot. Here's something that I said in a TikTok draft that I'm yet to post is people get on the internet and show their ass by saying, nobody is talking about this topic. And I will tell you what, someone is out there talking about it. Your algorithms just haven't shown you that topic yet. And it's great that you are now interested in that topic, especially if it's like social justice or whatever. But being outraged because nobody is talking about it is just proving to everybody that you haven't been interested up until this point. You haven't seen any content on it. Your algorithms aren't showing you it, especially on TikTok where the algorithm is inside your brain. So for me to be like, I never hear anyone talking about it is because I didn't think about or consume content about moving house until I moved. And even then I still sort of don't because I've done it and I just am figuring it out as I go. But what you don't hear that often, and I think we should hear more often, is that moving house is hugely traumatic. There is a lot of grief involved in it. I moved at the same time that my uncle passed away in a different state when none of my family could go to the funeral or the wake. And I think most of my family still hasn't been up to Queensland because every time it's like, oh, it seems like things are opening up again. All right, I'm going to book something for 3 weeks from now. By the time 3 weeks comes, there's been another outbreak somewhere and someone's borders are closed or something. So that has been really hard. And that was at the very end of November, beginning of December of 2020, which is when I packed the boot of my car and I drove from Sydney to Melbourne and was like, I'm just going to find an apartment and a job. It will be easy, won't it? And it wasn't. Spoiler alert, packing your bags and running away from your problems isn't the easiest thing. I did get an apartment really quickly because it was coming up to the point where uni was going to start again in a few months, and a lot of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments were going for quite cheap because there were no international students coming to fill the gaps of those apartments as they usually would, and nobody was moving. So finding an apartment was really easy in a pandemic because no one was moving house except for me and other idiots. And then finding a job, really difficult. So when I got here, I had an apartment within 2 weeks. And then I think it was like something 4.5 months before I found a job. I ate through way more of my savings than I thought that I would. I ate through all of my savings. It was really hard financially. And there was look, I don't want to get too personal here, but I'm a huge proponent of pack your bags and move away. Run away from your problems for this reason. Driving on the same streets that I had been driving on since I was a kid. When I moved out the first time, it was 4 suburbs away. I was still going to the same local shopping centres. I was still going to the same movie theatres. I was still driving on the same main roads. Everything was the same, just from like, you know, it was like standing on the opposite side of a football field. I'm still watching the same game. I'm just seeing it from a very slightly different angle. And that was fine for then. When I moved out, 20, 21, something. And I moved out and I lived out of home for a few years before the relationship that I had moved out with, that fell apart in a very dramatic and horrendous way. I moved back home. My parents were overseas and I was living at home, but by myself or with my brother when he was there, on and off. And then too many years went by and then my parents came home. They were no longer living overseas or living interstate. And then the pandemic hit. And then I was like, what have I been doing? I've been living back at home for 5 years, 6 years. I don't want to be here. I also had like a second false start where I decided I was going to move away. And I was like, oh, I'll move to England because my mum was born there. So I have the passport. And I went on a big holiday and traveled around the globe for like a couple of months, which was amazing. And then I ended up in London and it was September and it was cold and it was dark and I had no friends, and I'd been through on my travels a really horrific experience in America because they don't have gun laws. And so that was not fun for me. And now I can't hear a balloon pop, which is so much fun. And then people go, oh, what's that about? And you're like, I don't really want to discuss my trauma with you. But one day I'll tell the story of the shooting I was in America. Anyway, I got to London and was like, me sad, sky dark, don't want to be here. And so I came home and ended up living in the same house again. So I've moved out now 3 times. Each time it just hasn't quite worked out very well. I either wasn't in the right frame of mind, I didn't have the right financials, my relationship ended, whatever. So this isn't the first time I've moved out of my parents' house, but I knew it was going to be the last time. I knew that when I moved out, and my parents said, you can always come home. And I was kind of telling myself like, yeah, I can always go home. But I think I knew that wasn't going to be the case, partly because of my age, partly because of my financial situation, and partly because my parents were planning on selling their house really soon. So I knew I was never going to go home. So the moving out this time, there was so much grief and loss associated with that time. The isolation of suddenly, the pandemic's back. We thought 2021, it was going to be over, and then it wasn't. And then February in Melbourne, we had a 5-day snap lockdown and blah, blah, blah. All of these things kind of culminated in me for 4 months being, I would say, catatonic anxiety. I was unable to do anything. I was exclusively focusing my energy on not thinking bad thoughts so I didn't have a panic attack. And every time I left the house, I would go to Woolworths and I would cry doing my grocery shopping, and I would just think, I just need somebody to help me, but I'm living alone and I can't get a hug from my family, and I can't even get a hug from my friends because we have very different schedules, and the ones who live in the same city as me, and then there's a lockdown, and then we don't see each other, and it just was not a great time. But that 4 months of like horrendous falling apartness that I went through, I actually think was super important, because I wouldn't have done that if I had stayed in the same place where I had experienced a lot of trauma in my childhood and my teenage years from lots of different reasons, the same suburbs and streets I was driving on when I was in my abusive marriage. I had to leave that place. I had to leave so that I could have the breathing room to fall apart. And I also consciously chose a 1-bedroom apartment and to live alone for that reason, because I was like, God knows when I get to Melbourne and I'm not living in the same room where I had, horrible nightmares as a child or whatever, all of this stuff that like, I don't need to go into the details of. My parents are lovely parents. I love them very much, and they did their best. Different people in my life were very evil, including my ex-husband, and I will slander him till the day I die. But I lived in that same house that I grew up in with my ex-husband for a period of time. I moved out with him. My parents moved away. We moved into the house. He moved out of the house. I was still in that. It was like, being in the same physical space where you have experienced a lot of trauma, I do not think is conducive to healing. And I was in a lot of therapy for a lot of years, once a week for years at a time. Occasionally when I would get broke, I would go once a month instead. But it was always one of those things that I knew, like, I have to build this into my budget, because if I'm going to get over my trauma, I've really got to put the effort in. I also hate CBT therapy. I don't think it helps. I still haven't found a therapy that works for me other than McDonald's nuggets and crying, which I actually don't think helps. I think it makes things worse. But it's my only coping mechanism at the moment. And especially when you're poor, like $8 for a chicken nugget meal is much cheaper than hundreds of dollars output for a therapy session. But I think that if you are struggling, should I move out? How am I going to survive being on my own? I think that people are so much more resilient than they realize. Yes, I cried for 4 months in Melbourne. I moved to Melbourne and cried for 4 months straight and had so much anxiety. But guess what I also did? I went to the doctor 4 different times to get a new medication because I wanted to be on a medication. The one that I started taking at first didn't work. She gave me a second one that I then was having anxiety about taking. Oh my goodness. I have anxiety about a lot of things, but taking new medication, whoo, baby, it just doesn't gel in my brain. My brain is like, you will be allergic to this. You will 100% die. And that has been really fun this last week because I got my first COVID vaccination. I got Pfizer. I work with the NDIS and disabled kids, which is why I was able to get it in like whatever it's called 1B. That's happened now. So I've got it. Yay. But the anxiety around that, it was really bringing up a lot of stuff. But I've been here for 7 months now. So this is, 4 months of pure anxiety, 2.5 months of getting my life back together, and then pandemic again. I don't know. Don't quote me on those dates. They're slightly incorrect. But the anxiety that I had around like taking new medication that I got from this doctor, I went back, I got something else. I went back and I said, I definitely need a therapist. Who can you provide? She put me in contact with an amazing woman. We had a couple of sessions, except it was remote. And I think that you should always have therapy in a place that is not your house. And that just wasn't an option. I have my couch and I'm sitting on one side of the couch to watch TV, and on the other side of the couch, which is half a bum away, sitting on the other side of the couch to do therapy and try to come to terms with grief and loss and the death of my uncle and moving out of my family home, and the fact that I don't think I'll ever feel at home again, but also I want to burn that place down because of the horrible things that have happened, and like this whole like messy trauma shit that I'm trying to work out. And then it's like, oh, okay, guess that's over now. I will just stand up and then be in the space that I'm supposed to feel safe and secure in. It just doesn't work. I think that for me, therapy, I need that car ride to and from to like get yourself in the brain space and then come back. I was having panic attacks, remembering the panic attack that I'd had a few weeks prior or a few months prior. So it was rough, but it was so useful because I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have gone through it if I hadn't have moved out. I think there is a piece of healing, which people talk about a lot, and it's like the only way out is through. I talk about this when I talk about screenwriting a lot, which is the answer to the question you seek is inside the cave which you are afraid to enter. And I think for me, the cave that I was afraid to enter was being alone with my own thoughts. And I still hate that. I still constantly am listening to podcasts and watching TikToks. But I also wasn't in a physical space where I had to think about anybody else. I only had to worry about myself and my own anxieties and what was being triggered for me by the environment and everything else. And that breathing space was so important. So if you take anything from this first episode of Girl on the Move, it is pack your bags and move away. If you are wondering if it's a good idea to move out of home, if you are financially capable of doing it, I don't think that there is a downside from that. My parents have now sold my childhood home that I moved out of 6 months ago, which is a whole nother piece of grief and loss, especially considering that we are in another lockdown. We did a June lockdown in Victoria, and then New South Wales has done a, stay-at-home order. Then I don't know what New South Wales is doing. Gladys is really not being clear in her communication. Now in Victoria, we're in a second lockdown in a very close time space to each other, June and then July. So my parents have bought a new house and are selling the old house, and I'm supposed to be going to Sydney to pack up the last of my stuff. This piecemeal move that I did, part of it in November, and then part of it in, I want to say late February. I went back to Sydney, packed my boot again, brought back mostly furniture the second time. I'm supposed to go back again and pack the boot of my car a third time, and it's like, that's it. If it doesn't fit in the boot of my car, it's either getting donated or, I don't know, going in the bin. That's my stuff. I have 3 car boots. But this third car boot, I can't drive up there because of this damn pandemic. And that's a whole other stress of doing the move in pieces. I think it has felt incomplete, and it has made it feel not quite real a little bit. Well, I should really be calling this fucking thing tangents. I should really be calling this damn thing tangents, because I start talking and I get distracted and there's no question. It's not like an interview question where someone asks you and you're like, oh, that's the goal I'm trying to get to, is answering that question. No, it's just me rambling in my apartment because I can't afford therapy right now. Yes, I was doing it in the 4 months and then pandemic hit and didn't have a job and blah, blah, blah. So that's why I made a TikTok account. Because I couldn't afford therapy and making this was too much. And look, it's been really interesting being perceived. And like, I want to be perceived. Baby, look at me, but only when I say so. And only for the audience that I want. And I've been doing some feminism online on my TikTok, which does not go well because algorithms are built to connect you with and put you in front of people who disagree with you because commenting is engagement. And you know what? It's so much fun getting comments from men who listened to Rage Against the Machine as a teenager and thought that fuck you, I won't do what you told me was about their mum. And now they just hate women who say things in a declarative tone because they can't comprehend that who they should be hating is everybody that they now fap over. Like Jeff Bezos. Oh, don't get me started on Jeff Bezos going to space. This is not a topical podcast, but I hope he blows up. People just don't seem to, on the same scale, comment nice, supportive stuff, especially if it's about a quote unquote political topic such as feminism or being queer. People will be like, yeah, obviously women should have the same rights as men. I agree with this point that this creator is making and I'm just going to scroll on. They might give it a like, but they'll just scroll on. Like they don't need to add on to it. Whereas I think if an audience member disagrees with something, they are more inclined just from a personal place. They are compelled to say, no, I don't agree with that and I need to refute it because I'm trying to stand up for something. You don't need to stand up for something that is already there that you agree in. You only need to stand up against the stuff you disagree in. So it's been really fun to be on social media, being stressed and sad and just getting some comments from men with opinions and smelly buttholes. That's the theme song of my TikTok account. But there are a lot of things that I do want to say that I can't put in 60 seconds or 30 seconds. And also, my TikTok is not me talking about my life. Whereas this is me talking about my life and trying to maybe give some helpful advice at the end of it. And what is my advice? The Girl Records is brought to you by bangers&mash.site. Head over to see what literal growing pains look like and join us in the forum to get some conversation started. You can follow us on socials at _bangersmag, or you can follow me, Hannah Darkling, at HJDarkling. Don't worry, all of the links for these will be in the description below. Give us a like if you enjoyed this episode and be sure to share it with a friend who's trying to get their shit together in the very specific way I discussed. Thanks for listening and don't forget, you're a babe. My parents have sold my childhood home, but they bought a new house that has the same amount of bedrooms. I don't even know. It's a lot of friggin' bedrooms for what they consider downsizing. It was cheaper because it's in a different state, but it's like, geez Louise, you guys, that's not really a downsize. But I can always go live with them again. I'm very, very privileged and lucky to have that option. And so I can't speak to anybody else's experience, but I do think that move away from your trauma physically is a great step to moving away from it emotionally. And then on top of that, if shit goes pear-shaped, there will always be people there to support you, and you may not know them yet and you may not think that they exist, but they are out there. Like, I have a couch. You know what I mean? Like, that seems like such a stupid, trite thing to say. But there are people out there who it's like, look, if you really, really are struggling, if anybody at my work that I work with was like, hey, I moved here a few months ago, things have gone really badly, I don't know what to do, I would be like, how can I help you? We don't know each other very well at all. Someone that I work with has had their mother become suddenly very ill. And when I speak to her on the phone, like, I'm almost crying and I'm giving her a hug. And I'm like, I met you a month ago. And I am now a huge part of your support system because we work together. And am I your manager? I don't know. That's a whole thing for the how do you get a job in a new state episode. But there is a support system out there for you, and you might not have met those people yet, and you might think it is impossible to meet those people, but they are there. And I guess then part of the last 6 months has been, do I regret living alone? Yes and no. During a 2-week lockdown, do I regret living alone? Absolutely. I wish I had housemates. But in the long run, do I want to be living with strangers who maybe aren't taking the same amount of precaution around COVID that I am? Absolutely not. Did I want to move in with strangers and then be crying for 4 months and have them think that I'm a basket case? Absolutely not. I think for me, living alone when I moved was the right step. And in the future, do I want to live with someone? I think so, yes. Do they need to be a romantic partner? No, but they would have to be quite a close personal friend of mine. Just because I already do enough interacting with kind of acquaintances and strangers in my jobs, which are both very public facing. I don't want to have to add on to that coming home and for the first few months of living in a place feeling sort of like weird and unwelcome and not sure whose is what and if I can use this spoon. And that seems like a whole emotional, I don't know, baggage that I'm not ready for. Mind you, I'm now in this place. I got a 6-month lease when I first moved into this apartment. And then when the 6 months was coming up and I was like, holy shit, I think I didn't have a job yet, or I had one job, but it was I don't even know. Can't remember the timing of it. I was worried. I was like, I'm going to have to move out. That didn't happen. And I ended up signing on a 12-month lease here. So now I'm here for another 11 months. I forget when that lease, I don't know the dates of it. But I'm in this apartment by myself for another 11 months, which I'm not scared of unless lockdowns continue happening. I'm pro-lockdown. I'm so pro-lockdown, and I need everybody to know that. Part of the reason when people go, why did you move to Melbourne? Because fuck the Liberals, that's why. Because Dan Andrews handled 2020 really well, and I would rather live in a state where it's a hard, fast, early, strict lockdown than whatever the fuck is happening in Sydney right now in June and July of 2021. And I feel really sorry for my family that's living in Sydney because I think they've been let down by that government. You can't really say that though. When a stranger is like, so why did you move to Melbourne? I can't go because fuck the Liberals. Mind you, I've just put on a podcast. Oh, yay. But I'm very pro-lockdown is what I'm saying. I think that it's the right thing to do until the federal government can roll out the vaccines in a meaningful way. Don't get me started on ScoMo. Fucking hate him. But it is hard. I'm pro-lockdown, but it is hard. And I think that that's everything. There is duality and multitudinousness. That's not a word. There are multitudes in everything. I can be both pro-lockdown, but also feel very lonely and isolated. And I can love the possibility that social media presents of connection and community, and also absolutely fucking hate it when people comment on my TikToks because shut the fuck up, you're so stupid, I hate you. I think it can be both. Or am I just giving myself a loophole for my own contradictions and not wanting to challenge the things inside of me that are problematic? Let me know in the comments below. Am I problematic? I don't want to hear about it. Actually, I only want to hear if you're like #relatable. I don't want to hear from you if you disagree with me and you're going to be rude about it. Not interested. So that's sort of where I'm at. Run away. I'm pro running away. I'm pro lockdown. And I am actually really happy that I'm in a space where I feel like I can be actually talking about the things that I've gone through in the last 6 or 7 months. Because, yeah, look, did I almost cry at the beginning there? For sure. Did you hear it in my voice cracking? Yes. Did we lose a tear? No. And I think that that's a good emotional level to be at when I'm telling stories about how hard it is to move, about what it's like to get a new GP, which was really difficult. That's a whole other episode. I also would like to remind everybody that my dream, other than being a motivational speaker, is being Dolly Doctor, or there was an equivalent of Dolly Doctor that wasn't like vaginal discharge questions and was life questions like, oh my God, my teacher's being so mean to me. How do I deal with that? Because it was obviously teenage stuff. What I'm saying is I would like to be an advice columnist. So if you have any questions, suggestions, thoughts, there will be a link in the description for you to contact me either through an email, or you can leave a voice note. Did you know that? You can actually call up and leave a voice note, and I might include it in a next episode. If you want to call me, hey, everyone out there who's listening to Girl on the Move, if you're feeling lonely, give me a call. Oh, Oh my goodness. Like, what's the joke there? Is the joke there that, like, I would never work at a phone sex hotline? I would. If they paid me enough, I would. Really. I work in retail. You think that I have any dignity left? You think I would be embarrassed? I wouldn't be. I would do it. I hope that this weird convoluted story of me being sad and moving interstate has given you at least one tiny nugget of helpful information, advice maybe. And I do want to hear from people out there. You know, you might listen to this while you're doing the dishes so that you feel less alone. I don't have that when I record this. The way that I feel less alone is through like comments or feedback. If you want to do that, that would genuinely be lovely. But no matter what, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really do enjoy sitting down and trying to make sense of what I've gone through in a way that hopefully can be helpful for other people. And don't forget you're a babe. Bye. Yeah. I don't want to be done. I want to keep talking because I feel really lonely.